Thanks for coming. I'll get through some of the boring housekeeping things before, people are filtering in, but this is an event as part of WamJam Online, which is a iteration of WamJam, which happens every year. It happened last year in Perth and was meant to happen this year in Sydney due to COVID. It's been turned into an online event this year. As with everything in the parkour community, it is a volunteer-run thing. And if you would like to contribute, I'll pop a note up around, but we are taking donations to cover the costs of this event and then to donate onto the 2021 event that will happen in Sydney. I'll post links about that. And that's just gone 35 past, so I think we'll pass on to Liam to take over. Actually, sorry, one more thing. If you are in the Zoom event, feel free to pop questions into the chat or the Q&A box. Thank you, Liam.
Easy. So yeah, I figured I would just quickly burn through some, I guess, a general background on instructing in parkour in general for those of you that aren't necessarily already instructors or are interested in going down that pathway. And then I wanted to get into the specifics from the APA's point of view. So I guess purely for me, I've been instructing for quite a while now. Quite a few years. I can't even work it out. But one of the things I've noticed is that the best instructors are the people that genuinely enjoy seeing other people progress. You may think, oh, what if I don't have the skills? What if I don't have the abilities? What if I'm not a god? I don't have a huge Facebook, a huge social media following because of how good I am at parkour. No, the most important thing about an instructor is just that desire to see other people improve. Like, your best achievement as an instructor is having your students get better than you. If you manage to do that, then you are an awesome instructor. So I think if those of you that are considering the idea of becoming an instructor, I'd like to highlight a few of the pros and cons, just to help you with that decision. I guess the first one for me, and a huge one as to why I got into instructing, was being able to explain to someone else exactly what it is you're doing, exactly why you put your foot in that particular spot, why you don't look at your feet when you're running at a wall. Being able to explain that to someone else in simple terminology that they can understand means that you yourself are going to improve your abilities and have a much greater capacity for movement in general. You're going to be able to understand, oh, that's why I do this, that's why I do this, because you've had to explain it to someone else. And I also see a lot of people manage to break through barriers that they had previously simply because they had taken the time to break something down, break a movement down for someone else, and in doing so have unlocked new ideas or new ways of doing things. I really like the growth of the community aspect of instructing as well. You are essentially on the front lines helping bring more people into this amazing activity that we all sort of know and love. Just the joy you can see when people realize that there are other people out there that do these things. Oh, there are other people that climb trees and enjoy it, and they're actually adults. What? And that is a huge appeal to being an instructor. You can share that love with more people. I also like getting inspiration from my students. The amount of times you see a student do something in a completely different way to how you would do it, and you're like, why did I never think of that? I've had 5-year-olds that I've been showing the love of just movement, and I've watched them do something. I'm like, how did you do that? You've gotten up a wall that's like 20 times your height. I would struggle with that wall. Like, how? Teach me your ways. And it's just amazing. It's super inspiring to be able to see that from your students. And then, of course, as I said earlier, they suddenly get better than you, and you're watching them doing crazy stuff that you would never be able to do, but you get to share in that success. I like to sit back and go, yep, you did that. I get 50% of the royalties if you make it famous or something. I made you. All right, come on. But yeah, it's an amazing feeling. Some of the cons though, be prepared for a loss in your own time to work on your own parkour. Yes, it helps you a lot in understanding what you're doing, but at the end of the day with parkour, there are some things that we just literally need to repeat. We need to do. We need time to go out and train the movements that we want to train. Otherwise, some of those skills will degrade. And when you're already got limited amount of time to do your own training, putting instructing on top of that does also steal some of that time away from you. So be prepared for that. I find at the moment, a lot of my training is done while I'm also instructing. So I have to try and force myself to find time that is just for me, just for my own improvements. You're also accepting a portion of risk with your students. It's instructing parkour in particular, there is a lot of risk. There's an inherent risk in being that person that says to someone, yes, it is safe to run up this wall, or yes, it is safe to balance on that rail. So you're constantly being required to make decisions, make judgment calls, make assessments. Now, obviously that comes with time, it comes with practice, you get more confident. So don't stress if that's something that you can't do right now. It's something that you'd be expected to learn over time, but just be prepared for the fact that you will have to make these sorts of decisions. And the last one too is that as an instructor, you want to strive to constantly be improving your abilities as an instructor. You want to be learning how to teach different diverse folk. Like obviously there are some people who learn one way, there are people who learn a different way, and you're taking your experience from parkour, your learnings from parkour, and you've got to try and adapt that to some other way of thinking, other way of approaching the world. And if you don't make the time to learn how to do that, then you're going to struggle a little bit to progress as an instructor. So just basically being prepared to put the time in to do the absolute best by your students, I think is one of the cons of instructing. You've got to be prepared to dump that sort of time into it. So you've reviewed your pros and cons and you've decided, okay, no, actually I do want to become an instructor. The next step I would really advise would be getting a good grounding in parkour. So you don't have to be a god. Like I said, you don't have to be amazing at parkour, but what you do need to do is have a little bit of connection with parkour. You've got to have experience in movement. You've got to know how your own body works fairly well before you can start explaining that to other people. So my advice, like very start, is get out and practice, get out and train, stuff you're probably already doing, obviously being COVID safe as well at this particular time. But just working out, trying to just be there, train with different people, train with people that don't do the things that you do. I highly recommend training with people who train circuits, who train gymnastics, who fire twirling, contact improv, anything like that. Anything that is related to movement is going to help your abilities in parkour, and then by extension your abilities to instruct parkour. And then you want to start developing into the ability to self-assess. So you can do this. You don't need to be partnered up with a senior instructor or anything like that to do this. You just need to do your training, but critically think about why it is you're doing the things you do. So, when you do a step vault, for example, why do you put your foot there? Why do you put your hand there? Where is my center of mass? How would I explain this to someone else who is watching me do this? How would I stop them from injuring themselves, things like that. So that sort of self-assessment is what I tend to look for in someone that is starting to become an instructor. Once they're starting to make those critical self-reflections, that I see as a sign of, yes, this person is starting the pathway to becoming an instructor. From there, try and find a mentor. If you can find someone that is also doing instructing, or even just someone at, say, like at a jam who tends to help the newcomers, to try to give advice and tips to people like that. That's a really great way to get that experience and see how other people explain things. They may not necessarily be a great instructor, but at the very least, you can see what not to do. You can find these sorts of people through different organizations. Pretty much every state has a collection of organizations that do teach parkour, or at least include parkour within their umbrella. There is also a lot of like jams. Every time we get out and train together, there is like the potential for you to meet people there that have taught other people. We have very much a community of skill sharing and collaboration in this. Join in with that. Try and learn how other people are teaching things, and you try and give something back. If you see someone new at that jam that you've gone to, and you see them struggling with something, or you see them looking on and wanting to join in, but don't feel like brave enough, or don't feel like they can't, take the time to explain, to help them. Especially with jams and organizations like that, it's a bit of a lower risk because obviously the other alternative is joining a company or a gym, something like that, somewhere that teaches parkour and charges for that. The risk with that then is you have this professional client relationship. Then there is a greater expectation on your abilities, whereas if you are just helping someone else at a jam in an informal setting, it's a great way for you to cut your teeth, I think the phrase is. Get used to the idea of teaching someone without that pressure, without that, I'm paying you, therefore this had better be the best class of my life sort of approach you might find with some other places. I also tend to find that, for example, in a gymnastics, in a gym, in an indoor parkour class space, there's not as much time for your own development. It's kind of woe to go. The minute you're hired, you're going to be teaching large classes of many different students. A lot of the time it's children. That's where most of the market is. So it's a bigger risk. It's obviously you're paid. Obviously it's much better to be paid to do the things that you love, but it comes with a bit of a cost. It comes with a lot more stress, and it's not the greatest environment for learning things. Having said that, I have seen some exceptional gym owners that have a great training program, but it's a bit of a risk sometimes. And then from there, you've started instructing, you've started practicing that actual ability. Now the step is improving. And like I said before, you really need to make that time to get better, to grow, if that's what you really want out of parkour. My biggest advice is go to classes. You may be really good at what you're doing, but go and attend a class. Go to a first timers class run by another instructor. Watch how they do it. Hey, they might even find areas of your technique that need improving. Every time I go somewhere else, I love to go to a first timers class and just sort of have them sort of critique what I'm doing and just see how the different techniques work. From there, also challenging yourself to teaching people with different ability levels, people with disabilities, people with different learning styles. One of the hardest classes I've ever run, I ran in Spanish with very basic Spanish. I had no idea about what the body parts were named or anything like that. It just literally, I was approached on the street. I was out training and I had someone ask me, and I managed to work out that's what they wanted to know. And so, yeah, we worked together, and there was a lot of hand gestures and a lot of like facial expressions and things like that. But yeah, it really challenged me as an instructor. And so that's kind of the pathway that I see instructors needing to go on. For people to want to grow and become better, it's really challenging yourself to teach in interesting and diverse ways. You're right for me, Kelly, to keep going, or do you want me to answer some questions on that stuff in particular first? Sorry, you're muted. All right, cool. I assume there's no significant questions at this time. So that's where I guess the APA quals come in. So the biggest question that we get a lot is, okay, I want to teach parkour, but there's risk in that. There's all of a sudden I'm telling people to do things and they might hurt themselves, they might hurt others, they might cause issues, things like that. And especially if you want to be charging for those services, things like that, you then start getting into this issue where you have insurance problems. In this day and age, there's a high likelihood that you could cause an issue where some bystander is walking past, they get injured, and then it's on the instructors for basically having one of their students injure a passerby. They sue you, yada, yada, yada. It gets really complicated. So that's essentially where the APA quals was sort of founded, was this idea of let's try and providing insurance for the people. And in order to do that, we need to be able to ensure that instructors are of a certain level, certain capability, to ensure that they're, for example, the premium is not super high, that the insurer will actually insure us, and just also to ensure that anyone operating under that title, under that banner, are actually teaching at a high level. So recently there's been a lot of a push to adapt this qualification system to try and realign it with, I guess, where the progress of our community, of our parkour community, has gone lately. The original systems, and to be honest, a lot of systems, I've done the adapt qualifications, I've done a few of the others, and a lot of them is focus more on the parkour, the physical prowess of the individual, their capability to do amazing things with their body, things like that, rather than that journey of an instructor, like I just spoke about, that pathway of getting to know your own body, getting to being able to self-assess yourself, and then progressing onto that to learning different ways of teaching. So what our push at the moment is to try and reshape that qualification system to make it better aligned with what an instructor should be doing, or what an instructor would, what the growth of an instructor would look like. Why you'd want a qualification is pretty simple. Useful for some jobs. There will be, if there's a competition for a particular spot, working in a teaching organization, something like that, a qualification will obviously make you look like a lot better. Great way to sort of self-analyze where you're at as an instructor. Make sure that you are aware of some of the best teaching practices, and be able to confidently say, yes, I've got this certificate, therefore somebody has assessed me and said, yes, I am, competent to be doing this. And then thirdly is that insurance coverage. So that's what our particular qualification does come with, that insurance coverage. There are some others around the world. I'm not sure what state they're in as far as getting national coverage, but there are ones being run out of the US and the UK and things like that do come with sort of a coverage for instructors. At the current standpoint is we've overhauled. We've had a lot of discussions in working out where our actual priorities are, where we actually care about what an instructor is able to do and what an instructor is able to demonstrate, and then also trying to balance that with the risk management side of things. So obviously, our number one priority is to try and keep our students, and conversely all our instructors' students, safe. So therefore we have to try and get this balance of the two. And so what we've arrived at the moment is a system that has 3 tiers. The first tier is the assistant instructor. The idea with that is that's purely someone who is starting on that pathway, someone who has been training for a little while, or been training with some friends, or just started to really love this parkour thing and want to take that and give that to other people, want to be able to share that. The assistant instructor is a way of getting coverage to be able to continue to learn under the guidance of a more experienced instructor. And that way you're not necessarily qualified to teach classes or anything like that by yourself, but you are covered to be maybe looking after 1 or 2 students while your supervisor is there looking after 2 others right next to you, things like that. The main restriction on that assistant instructor is just that line of sight. You have to be within line of sight of a qualified instructor, but it's very easy to get that assistant instructor qualification. A lot of things we care about for the assistant instructor are things like working with children checks. I'm not sure what they're called elsewhere in Australia, but basically your permit to be able to work with children. And also an endorsement from community. So what we're trying to push for with the qualification, well, our qualification system is really trying to make sure that when we're qualifying someone, they're also a member of that community. They're also sort of got to demonstrate a record of being a part of it. They've come to classes, they've been engaged, they've gone to jams, things like that. So we're trying more to establish this connection right from the start into the community, which is, I guess, our main focus. We're not so focused on the profit side of things. We're focused on building up a safe and sort of unified community. So the idea is that you do the assistant instructor. Obviously, if you're already super advanced, you know all about teaching parkour, things like that. This assistant instructor is just a very short stepping stone to be able to move on to the high levels. But the idea at the moment is that you have to go through each of them. There's no time frame, it's not thou shalt be an assistant instructor for this many years. But you have to complete all the requirements for assistant instructor, then you complete the requirements for class instructor and moving onwards. That brings me to the second tier, class instructor. So a class instructor is someone who is competent, they're capable, they are able to teach parkour. And for us, that means they're able to teach parkour unsupervised. Some of the biggest changes, the higher level requirements that we have for a class instructor is their ability to be able to respond to emergencies, being able to manage a class, being able to manage the risk in that class. So making sure their students are doing things within their capabilities and safely, and also being able to respond if something goes wrong. In that vein, for example, first aid training is mandatory for class instructor. You have to have a current first aid and CPR certificate to hold your class instructor. The class instructor allows you to look after a group of students. You don't need supervision from a more senior instructor. And it's basically you have proven yourself as being confident, capable, and you are able to make sure that people are safe. Your students are going to learn, they're going to learn well, and they're going to be safe. From there, following that path of instructor development, the next step is really, okay, you've been teaching for a while, or you've got heaps of experience teaching. Now you want to try and address some of those meta aspects. That's the thinking about why we teach things in a certain way. It's not, you know how to teach a step vault, for example. You could absolutely, tell a student exactly how to do it, but why is it you tell them in that way? And this is the level of thinking that we expect of our senior instructors. So a senior instructor is able to break things down and go, okay, we know that this is the best practice for teaching this particular move, but why is it best practice? What are some ways we can improve it? What are some of the links? It starts to get into, you'd start to see people with an understanding of some of the biomechanics behind the movements we do, some of the, basically the best of the best sort of training technique that we see from around the world. It would be someone able to learn that, to condense that and use that in their training. And most importantly, they would then be responsible for the training of other instructors. They're able to teach people how to instruct better. The assessment process for our senior instructor, we still haven't really established yet in detail, but our current plan is to focus more on project-based. So you've got your class instructor, that's proven that you're able to teach, full stop, but then we'd be looking for things like, looking for projects which prove that you are functioning at that higher level. That could be something like writing a training program for instructors how to teach neurodivergent students, for example. If you were to come up with a way of training instructors to better do that, you would be classed as, you would be capable of becoming a senior instructor. If you've done something to greatly improve the community, for example, Kel running this WamJam thing, this would absolutely count as a project, which would prove that Kel is capable of giving back to the community in a big way. And so that's kind of where we're going with the senior instructor route. So I guess, and my biggest thing that I want to address in these quals, and it's still a collaborative process, we're still working on it, but the biggest thing I'm pushing for is to have no requirement in that qualification that is not justifiable, that is not necessary to make sure the class and the students are safe. So one of the biggest questions I always get in any of these is, what happens if I can't do a cat pass? What happens if I can't do 3,000 push-ups with one hand? What we're moving towards is something that is not a requirement. Unfortunately, that is a requirement for a lot of other qualifications. Like I said, with the ADAPT one, that was barely got through that one, and that was purely just like, there was a lot of physical requirements in this, a lot of like technique that is super high level, amazing stuff, but it's just so hard. So that's what we're trying to avoid. Mostly with the understanding that physical prowess does not make you a good instructor. It's your ability to translate what you do, or translate what you've seen other people do, into a manner that a student can understand and that a student can learn from you and do it safely. Like I said, a student should be better than you. By the time you're finished, by the time you've brought them up and made them able to train themselves, like if you've managed to get them better than you, you have succeeded. So that's why we're moving away from requiring a lot of physical demonstrations of things. And that's mostly an effort to try and make things a lot more inclusive. For a very long time, it's been very hard to recognize that different people have different bodies, different people have different abilities. And so we're trying really hard to get a qualification that captures that idea, while still maintaining that risk management that we need to do from an insurance perspective. Some examples for our class instructor, a requirement that's going to be in there is the first aid certificate requirement. Now, there are some people who may not be able to physically get a first aid certificate, may not be able to obtain a CPR simply because they could not provide CPR in an emergency. These sorts of people we would be unable to give a class instructor to, purely because if we're going to give them the responsibility of being able to look after students by themselves, if something goes wrong, we need to know that they are going to be capable of providing that first aid, providing that support to the student or whoever has injured themselves in that particular circumstance. What we're not going to do, however, is require that same instructor to be able to do 36 muscle ups to be able to show a student how to do a muscle up. That's not essential. What we would be assessing, though, is could you describe to me in very good detail how you would build someone up from being able to not do a cat pass to being able to do a cat pass? How would you step it out? How would you explain to them? How would you, as an instructor, with the capabilities that your body has, be able to demonstrate just enough so that someone could understand what you're talking about? So we do have some exceptions that we're still trying to decide what it looks like, but we're thinking about introducing a restricted qualification, which means that you can't run classes by yourself, but you can still have the qualification status. Similar to like driving, if you can get a driver's license, if you need to wear glasses, you have it listed on your license that you must have glasses. And so we're tossing up ideas like that in order to be able to accommodate people that, say, couldn't get a first aid certificate or couldn't. One of the other requirements is demonstrate spotting. An instructor needs to be able to spot. They need to be able to be in a position where they can support a student working on something and be able to protect them. So one of our issues at the moment is trying to work out a way we can still give someone a qualification, but also make sure the students can be looked after. And that's where we're talking about things like having an assistant that must be always present, like some sort of aid, things like that. So that's where we're going. It's a very complicated process, a very long process. It's been going for a very long time. We're getting very close to being able to put things out. What we're moving over to is we've got a portal that's been set up. We're just about to release that for like sort of public trial. And the idea with this portal is it's going to step you through the process for how to apply. You're going to have different pages where you upload your documentation, things like that. You get, it sort of tells you all the requirements. It also will remind you when things are about to expire. And the idea with that is that we're not essentially relying on a bunch of volunteer people to keep, churning through applications, to keep ticking over the qualification system, which I think was quite unfair in the past. And I've seen a lot of examples where people have applied and, things have gotten lost, things like that. So the idea with this portal is to try and take that burden off of the future committee. Yeah, so that's where it's at the moment. Obviously, if anyone has any questions about getting qualified, things like that, send an email to the APA. You can try president@parkour.asn.au, or just hit us up on Facebook, and that'll be where you can find the absolute latest and greatest information. If you want to get involved in shaping what these qualifications look like, we do have a process for joining in on that we're calling delivery teams. Again, send us an email if you're interested, get involved. We've been doing occasional sort of working sessions where we all meet up over Google Meets and we just brainstorm ideas, put things together, and yeah, really trying to make a qualification system that works for everyone. Cool. Let me have a drink and then do you want to do questions, Kat?
Great, excellent. We've got a couple of questions already. So while Liam's hydrating there, one from Facebook that's real simple is, how many senior instructors does the APA currently have?
Well, under the existing APA system, we have none because there was an ongoing qualification requirement. But what we're going to do is introduce a transitionary period where a few people that have either previously achieved senior instructor with the APA or have a suitable level of experience or qualifications will be granted that senior instructor status purely for the assessing and endorsing of applications for the ongoing review process, things like that. And then after that, they will still have to meet those requirements. So there will still be ongoing requirements. So even those temporary ones are not exempt, I guess, from the future requirements of the qual. But again, we haven't yet completely have explicitly defined what a senior instructor qualification looks like just yet. But yeah, that's the best approach we've got at the moment. Trying to recognise the people who have already done the work previously, but also recognising that there were issues with the previous qualification system.
Sorry, struggling to unmute myself there. A question from Flint and Cam in Bendigo, asking for a rough estimate on when the senior qualification procedure might be finished. And they've got a secondary question there regarding, is it possible to get a qualification completed long distance, or is it going to require travel for people in regional areas?
So our push at the moment is to make it as non-gate kept, I don't even know if that's a term, as possible. There are limits though. Unfortunately, with some of the assessments, we do need to be able to observe, and we do need to be able to essentially tick off some practical capabilities. So part of the assessment for class instructor, for example, is you teach some classes while being observed by a senior instructor or a class instructor. And once you've been observed doing that, they then tick off that, yes, you can manage a class, you can maintain it safely, things like that. Those sorts of things, though, what we're trying to avoid is, previously we had it where senior instructors had to be present to be able to do that. And obviously, it was very hard to get access to these senior instructors because the idea is that there are only a few of them. They're only the people that are operating at a very high level. So what we're moving towards is that the class instructors can be the ones that sort of sit there, observe, take notes, even record, film the actual exercises, things like that. But then that class instructor is reporting back to a senior instructor who can be remote, can be anywhere in Australia or around the world, and they are responsible for reviewing all that documentation, and they're the ones that sign off on it. So yes, for some of the more remote communities, you will need access, but you'll only need access to someone that is a class instructor. And the idea is that we're going to make that quite, make a lot of those people available. Like, there's a lot of people that are already functioning at a class instructor level around Australia. And the idea is to get those people qualified up as quickly as possible under the new system. Obviously, if you've got previous qualifications, it's going to be very easy to get qualified under the new system. And then from there, we're basically using anyone with a qualification as kind of the assessor, the observer, if you will. Once they've observed something, they report back to our small group of senior instructors, and then they manage the qualification from there, if that makes sense. So yes, a little bit of travel, but it should only be to your nearest capital city, if you will.
Great. Everyone who's listening, feel free to post any questions that are follow-ups as well. But I'll move on to Amalia's question here, which I may need to get you to elaborate on a bit in the chat, Amalia. But their question is, are there any changes to the current quals? So I guess it would be good to get a general kind of comparison of what the previous system is as opposed to the one that's currently.
Yep. I guess the biggest change at the moment is with the physical components. So obviously, I don't know if you've previously looked at the old qualification system, but there was a lot of requirements for demonstration of things, and in particular things that were more about your physical capability. So there were things like rail balance, rail squats, doing cat passes, a running requirement, things like that. There was a lot of focus on the physical capability of the instructor, and we're trying to move away from that. We're trying not to require anything that is not mandatory. For example, for us, the practical system now at the moment looks like over the course of working with a more experienced instructor, like someone who actually has a qualification, they will have a checklist, and that checklist they fill out over the course of however long it takes. They just observe you assisting in their classes. That if they see you either explaining to a student, sorry, a good example, they see you spotting a student working on a movement, they may be doing a precision, doing a jump, and you're showing really good precision technique, boom, they can tick that off after the class or whatever. They can say, yep, I've observed them doing that. So we're trying to move away from this, the pressure of, okay, I need to get myself to an ability level where I can run this far, I can do these perfect things, and moving more to, can you explain to me? Can you teach a student how to do that thing perfectly? In my mind, and this is what I'm personally pushing for, is that I see someone who, I see in like gymnastics, for example, you've seen the coaches, you've seen these like world-class Olympic level coaches. None of them can do a single thing of the gymnastics that they do, right? But they absolutely know to a T how to teach these people to do these things and how to do them safely, how to look after their students, how to make sure their students are enjoying themselves and actually learning. So that's the biggest change, is getting rid of that. A couple of things that I think some people might still struggle with, perhaps, we're keeping class planning requirements. We're going to make that quite stringent. So developing written class plans, and unfortunately we're making that they have to be in English. They don't have to be perfect English. They don't have to be, we're not marking down for spelling or grammar or anything like that, but we're an Australian Parkour Association. Predominantly, we speak English in Australia. And so therefore, purely based on a numbers game, you need to be able to speak English well enough to be able to write a class plan. Again, doesn't need to be perfect English, but to be able to explain to another instructor so that you could hand that class plan over, and that other instructor can run with it and use it on the day. So there is a bit of a restriction there, but we didn't really see a way around that, and still being able to make sure people are properly planning and executing good classes. I don't know if that answers the question, Amalia.
Yeah, feel free to post any follow-up questions, as I said. We've got one from Cam in Bendigo again. So question here is, do you intend to have an amount of recognition for prior learning? The examples he's provided is if you do have a existing qualification in gymnastics or another discipline, or already are experienced in running classes.
Absolutely. We have so the qualification system as it stands is broken up into what we're calling modules, which is, we've considered these as like the 4 pillars to make a good instructor or make a qualification. I can't even remember off the top of my head, but essentially those 4 modules are broken up into components, and each of those components have a specific thing they're being assessed. So for example, a CPR certificate is one component, a first aid certificate is another component, a working with children check is another component again. And then also we have things like experience is being a separate component again. You have to, for a class instructor, you have to prove that you have the experience. Couple of ways, and this is what we're trying to do, is we're trying to have multiple ways to prove that you have this experience. One of those is if you've been an assistant instructor with an APA organization, like an associated organization underneath an APA qualified instructor, you can complete a logbook, and that logbook will count as evidence of your experience. You can use an existing APA qualification. So if you've previously held one, you can use that as evidence of your experience. Anything from, say, ADAPT or any other recognized like parkour qualification absolutely counts as evidence, as well as other gymnastics, basically related disciplines. Our assessment is sort of twofold. It's, do you have experience teaching, and then do you have experience in parkour? They don't necessarily have to have overlapped, but you have to, it'll be easier to be able to demonstrate this experience if it is specifically parkour teaching. You know, it's, having a qualification or something in a related discipline will help. It will absolutely help, but it may not be valid as much as a parkour teaching qualification, if that makes sense. You may have to provide additional evidence to prove it. So you might have to have, maybe you've been teaching for 10 years in Taekwondo or something like that. You provide evidence of that. And then we'd also maybe only need evidence of a shorter term experience teaching parkour or something like that. Or evidence that you have, one of the ones we've got is that if you can get letters from people that you have trained in parkour, even in an informal setting, that can count towards the evidence. So the idea is you have to basically build up to like 100 points of evidence of experience, and yes, other qualifications will count towards that.
Great, thank you. I haven't got any more questions from the floor yet, so I'm going to take over for a bit with some of my questions, and hopefully people will jump in with theirs as well. Could you give a rundown of what, if any, there are costs associated with becoming an APA qualified instructor, either directly or indirectly?
Cool. Most of the costs will come from, will depend on whether or not you are prepared to go on, like, depending on where your journey is at to begin with, but also whether you're prepared to go and volunteer your time with an existing organization or with a group that already has qualified instructors. Obviously, once, in order to obtain the experience, you need to have taught a certain amount. And then if you are prepared to go and volunteer that time with a local organization, for example, if you're in Perth and you came to Perth by call, we would absolutely train you up. We would help you through the process. That would all be free. But if you're looking at not wanting to do that, you're wanting more to fly someone out to you or something like that, have them run private one-on-one classes, yada, yada, that's where the cost will come in. And that really depends on your circumstance. As far as the APA is concerned, we charge a membership fee. So you have to be a current paid member with us in order to be covered by our insurance. And at the very least for that first, when you first get the qualification as well, that's a $10 joining fee, $50 membership fee, so $60 there. And then there is also an ongoing fee per student that you teach. So in order, because our premium is about, well, just over 10K or something like that. So we need to be able to make that back. And so how we do that is you get the qualification, you're covered by the insurance, and every student that you teach, it's, I think it's about $3 a head, something like that, that you then pay back to the APA to cover that premium, like your portion of the premium. We do it per student, basically because there are some people that teach a lot of students and there are some people that don't teach a lot of students. And the idea is to try and balance that out. And I think the other thing to go with that is the qualification system, you can absolutely say, so there will be a maintenance requirement on all of the qualifications. So in order to stay current and in order to be qualified under our, to be covered under our insurance, you have to be meeting these ongoing requirements. They include things like proving that you've still been teaching, keeping your working with children up to date, keeping your first aid up to date, things like that. But you can list on a resume that you achieved the qualification even if it has since lapsed, if that makes sense. So people will be able to jump onto our portal, they'll be able to go, okay, is this person qualified? If you're no longer current, it'll say you're no longer current, but it will confirm that you have achieved at that level. And if, hey, if you're not needing the insurance, if you're not wanting to vote as in the APA, then you've got the qualification, you use that on your CV, it's all good. It's only if you want to be covered by that insurance that's the issue.
I just have a little follow-up to that, which is, I suppose, a bit more technical. But if, say, I become a class instructor, I'm required to have a valid working with children check. I leave it to lapse because I can't afford the $123 or whatever at the time. I get that up to date. Does my class qualification come back, or do I have to go back and do the system again, go through the system again?
So how we're setting it up is that each of those components expire based on their own expiry date. So you can go from being current to suspended, or sorry, I think it's current to expired purely based on that working with children check expiring. Everything else can still be up to date, but it will still count you as expired if you don't meet that requirement. However, you then jump back on, upload the new working with children check, it'll automatically put you back to current. So the system we're working on is once you've achieved that, that level of the qualification, you have got that qualification, you are qualified to that level. However, what you lose is the insurance requirements. And if you're at a high level, you lose the ability to fulfill your role. So for example, if you are a senior instructor and you let your senior instructor qualification lapse, you are no longer allowed, or during that period that it's been allowed to lapse, you're no longer allowed to qualify other instructors, for example. You have to be current at the time that you are qualifying people. And same with, for the purposes of supervising an assistant instructor, someone who is an assistant instructor under our system, if you're qualified as an assistant instructor, but your supervisor, who might be a class instructor or a senior instructor, is no longer qualified, then you cannot teach. You need to be supervised by someone who is qualified. So yeah, we absolutely understand that people will be dropping in and out as the years go on. Coronavirus hits, you're no longer teaching, you don't need, you basically don't need some of this stuff. You let it lapse, the system will be there waiting for you, and all you have to do is do the things that you've missed out since that time period starts, and it goes current again.
Right, excellent. That reminds me of another question I had. And again, please everyone throw questions at Liam here. That's what we've got him on the hook for. First of all, a lot of us are teaching some form of movement or parkour classes online in Melbourne, or may well be doing that in the future. I guess, is that something that will count as experience in your view, or and is it something that I suppose you need to develop a literacy in coaches?
Yeah, absolutely. Any so this would count, for example, as evidence towards the experience requirement. That particular component that says, "Have you got experience?" The only catch you'd have to find is a way of documenting that. You just have to be able to, maybe you've got a written record of whenever it is you did it. What we do ask in some cases, so one of the other components is a reference from the community. So from either another instructor that's observed you, a student that you've taught, things like that. So if you're still able to obtain those references from someone you've been teaching via Zoom, things like that, then obviously that makes a big difference. On the virtual classes, I will say there is a little bit of complexity around teaching virtually. As far as the insurance companies go, there's a whole heap of forms and things like that. So it is possible to still get coverage while teaching via Zoom, but just know there's a little bit of extra work involved to be able to be covered for that. I think mostly it's due to the fact that you're not there presently. So if someone hurts themselves, what are you going to do? So it's just having a plan to deal with that.
Thank you. We have another question from Facebook. Are parkour instructors teaching the community for the enjoyment, or for competition, or for both?
So I'm happy to leave this for the instructor in particular. So there is a huge, if you've been in the parkour community for any period of time, you'll realize that there is a huge debate as to exactly what is parkour. And there is a huge amount of conflicting opinions on what that exactly is. You talk to the Yamaks, the founding fathers, if you will, and they have one opinion. You talk to the people that split off from there's another opinion. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that we do it for enjoyment. We are all training parkour because we enjoy it. We do parkour because we enjoy it. Like that's fundamentally, that is the reason why we do it. And so that is where our focus is on. Where our focus is not on competition, because it kind of goes against the attitude of self-development. It's kind of pressuring people into developing contra other people, like in competition with other people, whereas we're more interested in supporting people to basically develop the love of movement. If people go on and do competition from that, or if instructors themselves are getting involved in competition, that's fine. That's like completely acceptable. where we see our niches, where we see the Australian Parkour Association being focused on is purely on helping instructors around Australia spread parkour, spread that love of movement, spread that ability to get your body around the place and do things that you didn't think you were able to do before. And so, yeah, we're not focusing on competition. We're not planning on releasing any competition. But absolutely, there's people in the community that are interested in doing that. If they're looking to do some sort of competition, don't let that stop you. Don't let us say, you know, you can't do that, because that's not parkour. Do what you enjoy.
Good answer. Excellent. We're probably coming up on about an hour. I've got a couple more questions I'd like to throw at you, and then maybe we'll
Yeah, no stress.
Get off Zoom finally. My first question is about, I suppose, if you have a means to ensure that coaches are able to coach diverse communities, because this is a WamJam event, and WamJam is our national event for celebrating and centering women and gender diverse people. Women and gender diverse people all have an experience of a cis male coach being incapable of understanding. Climb up is different when your weight is in your hips, or not being able to understand that you can't get your chest any closer to the wall because there are boobs in the way. So is there a sort of either a means to ensure that coaches have that experience, or to encourage aspiring coaches to seek that out? And of course, we're not only talking about gender diverse people, we're talking about the experiences of people of color, neurodiverse people, but that's the question.
Easy. So yeah, that was literally, to be honest, the reason why I personally am putting so much effort into these quals at the moment is because I saw that as a big failing in the existing system, and I see it as one of the biggest obstacles, I think, in our community as a whole for new people joining us. It's that there's this perception of that dude doing the big things, the huge muscles, you know, super powerful, super awesome. And part of that, to be honest, part of that does derive from where parkour was founded. There was no denying it was founded by a bunch of dudes who prized that, you know, big jumps, big power, you know, super powerful energy, like lots of like building that strength up, overcoming these super hard competitions. But I think our community as a whole has moved on from that. We've realized that there is a lot more to be gained by having a much more diverse community, having a community of different abilities, different capabilities. And we're trying to make the quals reflect that. So we're doing this in stages. So the first stage at the moment is to remove those barriers that were there in the existing qualification system that are really not helpful towards making someone a good instructor. For example, a perfect one, muscle ups. There are like a lot of reasons why people with different body types cannot do muscle ups. My body is actually really perfect for muscle ups. We've got super broad shoulders and I don't have anything in front of my chest. But for other people, not the same story. So removing things like that. Being able to do a muscle up does not make you a good instructor. Like fundamentally, it does not make you a good instructor. It might make your climb ups a lot better. It might make you like super fast at running away, but being super fast at running away does not make you a good instructor. So yeah, that's our first stage. We're removing barriers like that. We're only keeping what barriers we have to have. And that's where I explain things like the class plans and the spotting, the first aid requirements. So we're trying to like pare it down to the absolute minimum. Our second stage is trying to provide a little bit more training to our instructors. And so part of the ongoing and part of the application process for a senior instructor, like I said, includes projects. And the idea is that those projects are maybe going to include things like making a training program for teaching diverse individuals, maybe neurodivergent classes, things like that. Like being able to teach different students. And if we can provide that training to our instructors, I think it's going to make a better instructor body. So yeah, so first stage, get rid of the barriers. Our second stage is going to be training up our instructors. I'm hoping that by the time we've gotten to the stage where we're training up our instructors, removing the barriers has allowed us to get more diverse instructors. I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of the instructors around Australia look a lot like me. So we're trying to really get rid of those barriers, and then hopefully by that time we've started training people up to teach better, and there'll be a little bit more inspiration for our students. It's like, hey, that instructor looks like me. That means I can probably be an instructor too. It's a long road. It's going to take us a while, and I'm just glad we're finally getting around to doing it.
Excellent, excellent answer. I have two more questions, and then
it's $30 per question, Kel. You do realise.
All right, fine. That's my membership money. My other question is kind of the flip side of that. So we all, you know, if you know 5 coaches, they've probably got between them 6 different approaches to how they coach parkour. Some people are going to be very focused on creative aspects. Some people are going to be that beast that you talked about that wants everyone to backwards quadrupedal upstairs all day, every day. So I suppose the being a good coach is often balancing broad knowledge with your own specialized interests. Is that reflected in the qualifications in any way? Can you have any degree of sort of specializations, or is this considered just a kind of first plateau?
So with all of the aspects of the qualifications, we're trying to constantly ask ourselves the question of, would this requirement make sure we don't let in someone who is going to get someone hurt or severely damage our community or damage the reputation of the Australian Parkour Association? And is this requirement going to stop someone who would have made an exceptional coach from becoming a coach? So that's kind of the 2 questions we're asking. And so a lot of our requirements, instead of being very explicit, it's like, instead of defining, when you do a warm-up, you must include this particular wrist exercise, this particular run. We're not doing that. What we will do later is eventually come out with like some, you know, training material that is designed to help instructors apply some of this knowledge, or the ones that aren't quite sure, give them an idea of what they can do. But our qualifications, specifically the requirements, are going to focus on the bare minimum, the like very focused thing. So it's going to be, can this person run a warm-up that achieves these goals? Does it, you know, increase cardiovascular activity? Does it increase engagement from the students? Does it ensure that their bodies are prepared for the class ahead? So it's going to be more of those broad questions, and that's why the assessment is going to be run by the more experienced instructors, and that's why the senior instructors will be the ones signing off on it, because at the end of the day, our assessment is going to need them to make the judgment call in each particular circumstance. Because as you said, some days if I'm in the mood and I've got the right class for it, my warm-up will consist of almost a conditioning session. But you know, other days if I've got a class where it's a bunch of kids who just want to have fun, we'll play games to warm up, you know. And I think that's an important thing we're trying to achieve. That's why it's taking us so bloody long to rewrite this, because it is very hard to not be explicit and still maintain that same level of security and our understanding of what people can do. But yeah, that's our goal. That's what we're trying to do.
Great, excellent. It's good to hear about the sort of approach as you're making these. I might just machine gun some practical questions at you, and then we can. So, first one, you said there's no sort of minimum time required to become qualified. So what sort of, say I've been assisting with classes in my area in an informal way, if I want to become formally qualified, how long would that take?
So the thing that takes the longest will be compiling all the documentation. So there, as I said, there are like letters of reference, things like that you need to get. You also need to be able to have, so one of the requirements for class instructor is to have completed, I think it's 4 classes supervised. And so obviously they'll take time, because unless you somehow have access to plenty of friends that can come and be students for a day, you may have to wait until the next class comes up and things like that. So in my head, we kind of set it as someone that is already operating at a class instructor level should be able to start and finish getting the whole thing within about a month. assuming all the ducks line up and it's all like hunky-dory. Senior instructor will take longer because we're going to go through a process similar to like almost like a PhD, where you've got to get approval of what the project's going to be, or there's like an approval process for the projects, and then there's going to be some things. So like senior instructor, you very much have to be involved in the community for that. But yeah, class instructor about a month, assistant instructor about a week. Like assistant instructor doesn't really give you anything. It's literally just we're going to cover you while you're learning to be an instructor.
On the other end of that, is there any, once you start the process of becoming qualified, must that be done within 12 months, or is there a maximum amount of time you can take?
We haven't specified any limits on this stuff yet. What we've tried to approach is that at the end of the day, once you sign up, you were assigned basically a senior instructor, or a senior instructor from the pool, and they are essentially your mentor for the process. So if they believe that if you've done some of the qualification requirements, you've submitted it all, yada, yada, then you vanish for like 3 years or something like that, and they've got no idea what you've been doing in the intervening time, they may or may not agree. If they know you, if you're in their local community and they know that you've still been teaching, then it won't be an issue. But if they have no idea who you are, then you may need to redo it. And we're leaving that with the senior instructor to make the decision, make the call on the specific case-by-case basis. But obviously, we'll have a little bit of guidance around that, but there's nothing that explicitly says, thou shalt get this done within this small time frame.
Right. When it comes to having someone to mentor you through a process as a senior instructor, is that a randomly assigned person, or could we hypothetically select or ask for a person, or is there a process around that yet?
Cool. So with this portal that we're setting up, I'm leaning towards you get a randomly assigned person when you basically start the process, but you could also apply and use someone that is in your community, for example. So there's no reason why, like, best of both worlds, you get, you can choose to be assigned to someone. If you don't have anyone, if you don't know anyone, we'll give you one automatically. Still working on I want there to be a system in place where if there are personal things or issues, clashes between you and that particular senior instructor, there is like an appeal process. You can get changed around to different ones. We're also going to be introducing for the senior instructor an ongoing requirement to review new applications. It's basically, it's part of maintaining that senior instructorship. You also need to be reviewing these as they come in. My aim is for there to be lots of options for people for you to go to, because obviously there are non-parkour related social dynamic issues that may occur between two senior instructors. But to become a senior instructor, there is a very high expectation on your ability to look past personal issues, your personal opinions about teaching, and look more towards what is the proper goal of this qualification. So if, you can choose, but there will hopefully be a system that allows for that adjustment.
Great. So on a super practical level, if I have now decided that I want to become a parkour instructor, what is the first thing that I do?
So we're going to be launching at our upcoming AGM on the 1st. We're going to be launching the portal itself. It's live for testing. So if anyone wants to actually just flick me an email and say, hey, like, I'm interested in jumping in on the beta test of this portal thing, I'll send you a link and you can sign up and have a look. Feedback would be great. At the moment, we're only launching some of the more easy components, and we're mainly focusing on existing instructors to try and get them back to being covered by the insurance. When I say existing, I mean anyone that's previously got an APA qualification, but we're also looking for some people to run through the process from start to finish, like new instructors, to be able to test the system and make sure it's working. And then ongoing, we're going to be releasing new components. So although you may have achieved the class instructor, by the end of this year, there may be some extra requirements we release next year. Then you've got like a month or so to complete those requirements, and then in order to kick things up to date.
Great, excellent. So keep an eye out in November.
Yeah, I'll be making a public post on Facebook and stuff once it's ready for the general public to break it.
That's very exciting. And so with that portal, that will be able to submit relevant documents electronically, obviously. So getting ducks in a row for those, as general advice would be maybe look into first aid, working with children. Any other qualifications that are a requirement?
Depending on how you want to meet the experience requirements. So one of the things for the experience requirements is, I mentioned before, you can use previous qualifications, use other qualifications. Another one is if you've been working with a particular employer, you can use a letter from that employer. So say you've been teaching in a gym for years or whatever, and you want to get the APA qual, just get a letter from your employer. We'll have a particular requirement on what that letter needs to include, but it's basically just the amount of hours you've worked, what your exact role has been, like have you just been teaching a particular type of class, have you actually been teaching parkour, things like that. So you can start getting those little ducks in a row. And yeah, if you are keen, if you are ready, like we can absolutely use people to jump in on the qual. Like, hey, if you're worried about a particular requirement that you've seen previously and you're like, I cannot do that, I don't think I'll ever be able to do it, jump in and help us make those decisions now. Because again, at the end of the day, a lot of the people working on this qual look like me. And so the more other people we can get involved in this stuff, I think the better it will be.
Wonderful. And my last question is, if you are having, say, access or other difficulties, maybe patchy internet, or you have a dyslexia or reading problems that make getting documents together, or you just don't feel comfortable with the community around you and need some support, how do we ask for that?
So these are the inquiries that would go to the committee. So essentially the idea of the portal is to cater for all those people that like can do those things and to be able to get through them quickly and manageably. If you need any extra support, any specific stuff, the committee will still be there. The committee will still be having oversight of the system. So it's reach out to the APA, ask your questions. The reason for the electronic side of things is just humans have other things in their lives. Volunteers have other things in their lives. So, and
who knows where to buy a stamp anymore anyway, right?
What's a stamp? No.
What's a stamp? Great, that's wonderful. So Too Long didn't read the line to ask questions and ask for support from the APA is there. If you are looking for support, you can always write to Women of Melbourne Parkour as well, and we can help you answer questions about what it's like to be a coach, what it's like to be to run a community. But I think that's all out of questions. I've tapped myself out. So anyone who is watching, if you come up with further questions, please feel free to post them in either the WamJam Online Facebook event, send them to Women of Melbourne Parkour Facebook page or to the Australian Parkour Facebook page as a question, or you can send us an email as well. Would like to thank you.
Add my email address into the chat.
Ah, great. I'd just like to thank Liam for your time. It's very helpful to have this discussion and get people thinking about how to get qualified if they want to. And we very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I just do a reminder for everyone, our AGM's coming up on the 1st of November. We'd highly appreciate getting other people, especially people that don't look like me, in on that committee. There are a few photos circulating of our current committee. We all look the same. So if we can, if any of you are thinking about it, if you're like, oh, I'm worried that it's gonna be so much effort, I'm worried that it's gonna be too much stuff, get in touch. There are plenty of us that you can ask, what is it like? What's the requirements? What's the involvement? So if you want to stick your hand up for a committee position, it's a not-for-profit, fortunately not paid, but we are in the position to make a massive change with the community if we can just, get together and do it.
Excellent, thank you. We'll put links to information about the AGM where we can, and yeah, let's all get qualified if we want to. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. See ya.